Hello, everyone, and welcome. We're so glad you could join us today for our webinar, Smarter Fundraising Asks Tools and Tactics to Maximize Donations. Fundraising success isn't about asking more often, it's about asking smarter. That's exactly what today's session is about. We'll show you how to personalize donation asks, leverage real-time insights, and design donor experiences that boost immediate contributions while building long-term loyalty. This webinar is part 4 of our 5-part webinar series. Next Wednesday, we'll wrap things up with multi-channel mastery, coordinating your asks across all channels, and we hope you can join us. If you missed any of the earlier sessions, you can catch replays of the full series on our website, and we'll drop a link to that towards the end of the session today. My name is Riley Fratz. Like I said, I'm here from Salt Lake City, and it seems Salt Lake is experiencing a power outage. So hopefully I don't drop, but so far so good. I'm the payments operations manager here at NationBuilder. I work across product engineering and customer-facing teams to bring strategic improvements to NationBuilder Payments, which is our integrated payment processor. I'm joined today by my colleague, Rachel, who is our senior sales engineer, and I'll hand it over to Rachel so she can introduce herself.
Thanks, Riley. Yeah, as mentioned, I'm Rachel. I'm a senior sales engineer with NationBuilder. And what I really focus on is talking to prospective NationBuilder customers, understanding, what types of tools they're using, what struggles, what issues they're having, and help put together a plan for them to be more successful and use NationBuilder. So I get to hear a lot about how people are fundraising, what is frustrating them about fundraising, and what is going well for them. So excited to share more about what we've learned with everyone today.
Throughout our time here together, Rachel and I will walk you through some strategies that organizations are using to increase donations by as much as 5 times. You'll come away with practical steps you can apply right away. So here's what we'll cover today. How to personalize the ask with data-driven targeting, campaigning with purpose using unified tracking, gaining real-time insights for better decision-making, meeting donors where they are with mobile-first giving, and finally, how to grow recurring revenue in a sustainable way. And each of these strategies is designed to address the real challenges fundraisers face every day. At the end of the session, we'll open up to answer any questions you might have, but feel free to write those in while we're chatting, and we'll have time to address those at the end. And that brings us to our goal for today. Our goal today is simple: to learn modern, data-driven fundraising tactics and to see how NationBuilder Payments makes them easier and more effective. It's not just about new tools, it's about showing you how to use those tools in a smarter way that saves time, reduces friction, and ultimately maximizes your donations. The first thing we'll talk about here is some common fundraising challenges. The reason we're here today is because fundraising isn't easy. No matter the size or mission of the organization, we tend to hear about the same set of challenges over and over. And the first is fractured systems. Many organizations are juggling a patchwork of different tools to handle their fundraising, communications, and supporter management. You might have one tool for collecting donations and a whole different one for sending emails and yet another for tracking your supporter information. And the problem is that none of these systems were really built to talk to each other. That means you end up relying on complicated integrations to keep your data in sync. Maybe your donation platform has to send records over to your email tool so that you can run an end-of-year appeal, or your CRM has to be updated manually every time someone gives. And if one of those connections breaks, your whole system is at risk of being out of date or incomplete. Instead of spending time engaging supporters, your staff ends up troubleshooting spreadsheets and integrations. The second challenge is a disconnected supporter journey. When tools and channels don't align, a donor's experience can feel fragmented. They might sign a petition in one place, give on another, and get emails from a third without ever feeling like it's part of a single intentional journey. The result is that every interaction feels transactional rather than part of a bigger story. Supporters don't see how their actions connect to your broader mission, so instead of building momentum, you risk losing their engagement. For staff, this also creates extra work. Without one system tying it all together, teams have to manually figure out who took which action, when, and what the right next step should be. That slows down outreach and makes it nearly impossible to deliver the kind of personalized experience that today's donors expect. And ultimately, it means missed opportunities. Moments when a supporter might have been ready to take the next step with your organization, the handoff between channels wasn't clear, so the connection was lost. The third is difficult reporting. If your data is scattered across systems, pulling together clear insights can be slow, frustrating, and often incomplete. Leaders and fundraisers want to know things like who are your top donors, which channels are performing best, where are we falling short, and why. But without unified reporting, those questions are much harder to answer quickly and confidently. Teams end up spending hours exporting spreadsheets, cleaning data, and trying to reconcile numbers between systems, only to end up with reports that are outdated the moment that they're finished. And the bigger issue is that when you don't have reliable real-time insights, you can't be proactive. So instead of spotting opportunities like a surge in interest around a campaign, you only see the impact weeks later when it's too late to act. This slows down your decision-making and creates uncertainty, and often leads to missed opportunities to double down on what's working. The next is high donor drop-off during checkout. Even when someone is motivated to give, the donation process itself can get in the way. Clunky forms, too many required fields, or steps that aren't mobile-friendly all create friction. And every extra click or confusing prompt is a chance for someone to abandon their gift. Think about it. Your supporters might be on their phone during a lunch break or responding to a call to action they saw on social media. If the form doesn't load quickly, if they have to pinch and zoom on your website, or if the payment options are limited, the odds of completing that donation drop sharply. And for organization, those missed gifts really add up. It's not just about losing one donation in that moment, it's the lifetime value of that donor and the missed opportunity to deepen that relationship with your cause. So optimizing the checkout experience isn't just about convenience, it's about making sure every ounce of donor intent actually translates into revenue for your mission. And finally, one of the most critical challenges, a lack of tools to retain recurring donors. Recurring giving is the single most reliable source of long-term revenue for nonprofits and campaigns, but many organizations simply don't have the infrastructure to support it properly. For donors, this shows up as frustration. They might want to update their card information, change the amount of their gift, or cancel their donation altogether. But without self-service tools, those requests turn into emails and phone calls that your staff has to handle manually. On the organization side, failed payments are another huge issue. Cards might expire, banks decline transactions, and without an automatic system to catch and retry those payments, you quietly lose donors month after month. The result is that recurring programs never reach their full potential. Instead of providing stable, predictable revenue, they become fragile, requiring constant staff intervention just to keep them going. And that's a missed opportunity because when recurring giving is set up the right way, it not only sustains day-to-day operations, but also gives organizations the freedom to plan ahead with confidence. So the good news about all these common fundraising challenges is that everything we'll share today is designed to address these 5 challenges directly. So as we move through the tactics that we'll share next, you'll see how smarter strategies combined with integrated tools can help overcome these barriers and unlock new levels of fundraising success.
Great. Thanks, Riley. So the first tactic we're going to talk about today is personalizing the ask. So I'm sure we've all gotten like the really generic, "Hi, friend, can you make a donation today?" email. And we want to avoid that. We want to personalize our donation ask so that our donors feel really valuable, especially those members who are, not just donors to us, but parts of our organization. They may be volunteering for you all, coming out to an event, signing petitions for you, and making like sizable donations. And when we don't acknowledge those things and we don't personalize the ask to like actually thank people for all of the work they're doing and all of the different ways they're supporting our organizations, our donors can feel alienated. So we want to avoid that and really focus in on how personalization is really key, especially for fundraising emails, but just for any time we're making asks to folks. In terms of stats, personalization in email can actually lead to 27% higher unique open rates, 21% higher click rates. This one is crazy to me, 202% better performing calls to action. I feel like that one alone should really get people excited to personalize their ask. 6 times higher transactions. And then what is insane is that about 45% of donation emails don't even address potential donors by name. So if that's like one thing that you take away from this webinar, it's just like at least add the name of donors when you're sending out a request to folks. I know today I received an email that said, "Hi friend," even though I know I had to submit my name when I made a donation with my credit card to those folks, so they know what it is. And a lot of this kind of comes back to what Riley highlighted with fractured systems. It can be hard for fundraising teams to have all of that data in place in their communication suites when they're putting together donation requests, because they may have that, that advocate information, that event information, that volunteer information, all in separate systems where they don't know to thank people for those actions, or they don't know what issues their donors care about because that data doesn't live in the same place they're communicating with donors. So that's one thing that we really would like to highlight is like enable yourself to personalize the ask by making sure that either you're using an integrated system where all of that donation data or all of that just supporter data can live in the same place, or make sure you have sort of the API flows, the manual imports experts, the segmentation in place so that you can, even if you don't have an integrated system, you have that data and you can use it to get these better open rates, these better click rates, these better transaction rates, etc. Because that's just really key. So some ways that you can personalize your ask is going to highlight kind of 3 here today. One is by targeting donors by their history. So making sure we understand how a donor usually donates to us and we make appropriate asks based on that information. So, if you have a donor who every time they donate, they give you $10, we don't want to reach out to them with a generic donation request for $100 because that just like isn't in line with their historical donation patterns with us. And same thing with maybe some of our big time major donors. If we have someone who gives us $1,000 every time they donate, they may feel a little frustrated if you reach out and ask for a $5 donation. So we want to make sure we're targeting donors by their history and we're personalizing our ask based on their giving patterns. Another easy one is geography. If we know where people live, we can reach out about events in their area or fundraising events in their area. We can reach out about issues that we know that are affecting them because of where they're at. And we can just like weave some things into our request that tie specifically back to where they're from. And then my favorite one is targeting people based on interest. So if we understand, today we're going to have a pretend scenario that we'll carry out throughout a few of these different tactics. And it's going to be that we're a big nonprofit advocacy group and we advocate for lots of different things. One of those things is education. And so whenever we have a petition that ties back to our education efforts, we want to make sure we track that interest so that anyone who takes action on that petition, we know that they care about that education issue. And then when we reach out to them, we're not just going to reach out to them for a generic donation, but we're going to say, hey, we have this education initiative that we're working on. Could you make a donation to directly impact how we can take action on this education issue? So really targeting people with what we know that they care about, with things that they've told us they care about, so that they're more likely to give because they have that connection to whatever ask we're asking for them. And that can be done, of course, on emails, as well as through other channels like just personalizing donation pages around particular campaigns through text, etc. So the next tactic to highlight here is campaigning with purpose. Another name for this is just like adding storytelling to your campaigns. So again, instead of sending out a generic donation request after a generic donation request. Let's put together a story so that our donors feel more motivated to give. So we're going to go back to our education example, and we're going to put together a campaign around education that has like some specific ask, that has a deadline, that has a story to tell. So we're going to also go back in time to August. We're going to say it's August and the start of school is coming up. So we're going to do a back to school donation fundraising campaign for anyone who cares about education. So we're going to set a deadline for that to be September 1st, first day of school. We want to raise $10,000. We're going to choose a particular goal on our donation page for this campaign. We're going to have a little tracker, just like you can see on this image here, to track where we're at achieving our goal. And when we email any of our supporters who we know care about education, we're going to reach out and say, hey, we have this back to school education campaign. We're hoping to raise $10,000 by September 1st. If each one of our donors gives $100, we can meet that goal. Can you give $100 today? So instead of just getting an email asking for $100, there's a story around why we're asking for it. There's urgency created, there's a deadline created, and there's like a reason to give a certain amount of money. So doing all of that can like help your supporters, help your donors feel like they're along a journey. And we can like also do that by stringing other actions together. So instead of just a bunch of emails, we can set up different pages on our website that are tied to this campaign. So that if we do have an education petition, when someone completes that, instead of just pushing them along to a generic donation page, we might clone our normal donation page and add an image that's tied to education, or add some language around where we're at achieving our goal, why this is our back to school campaign, and have them land on that page instead of landing on a generic donation campaign page, so that they're more motivated. We're going to kind of set up that journey so that people understand why we're asking for certain amounts and kind of what their next step is on the journey. And then the last piece of campaigning with purpose is making sure that as we are running these different campaigns, we're tracking how that campaign is going. So if we're asking on a web page, via an email, via a text, whenever someone makes those donations, we want to be able to track it back to the campaign so that we can tie it back to all of the work that we're doing. And when we're understanding what we should do for our next campaign, we can sort of reflect back and say, okay, how did this campaign go? Easily find all of the donations that were tied to this campaign and understand what channels did best. Which is kind of a good transition into our next fundraising tactic, which is big picture insights, aka fundraising reporting. So I'm sure everyone on this call probably already knows that reporting is so key to successful fundraising programs. You want to understand how you're trending, where you're performing well, where you're missing out on opportunities, so that you can make strategic decisions based on data and not just feels when we're putting together our strategy for our different programs. So some key factors in this is like knowing and understanding who your top donors are, making sure you have easy ways to report on those, and also highlighting that top donors doesn't always just mean like our biggest big gift donors, but also who are our top donors who have been donating to us for the past 5 years consistently. Who are those folks that come out to every single fundraising event and always donate, even if it's only $10? So we make sure we understand our top donors in terms of the amount of donations, but also in terms of frequency of donations, of recency of donations. So that we can keep close tabs on who those folks are, make sure we have good relationships with them, and then the more reporting we have on who they are and what their patterns are, the easier it will be to spot if something is changing, if they're falling off for some reason. Of course, understanding where you have opportunities, maybe donors who haven't donated much recently or have had a change in pattern in their donations. So we can really keep good tabs on that. And then, as I just mentioned, like really tracking different campaigns and different channels so that we understand what are our most effective campaigns and what are our most effective places to ask for donations. Do we get most of our donations in the mail through mailing? Should we like increase those? Or are most of them coming from, text request? And should we maybe focus in a little bit more on our texting campaigns? Some ways that you can do that is just automatically tag and segment donors. So in NationBuilder, we use the word tag a lot, but basically put in place a way within any system that you're using that you can quickly and easily see who are our small dollar donors, who are our mid-range donors, who are our big donors, who are our monthly donors versus our annual donors. You want to put those sort of frameworks in place and automate how people get moved in and out of those buckets, so that you can personalize the message that you're sending to folks. You're probably going to send a different message to those big time once yearly donors than to your small time monthly donors. So you want to have those all segmented and tagged appropriately so that you can communicate with them, meet them where they're at, and again, so that you can flag if there's changes in their behavior. And then triggering outreach based on giving patterns. I've talked about giving patterns a lot, but the more we understand about when people give, the better we can meet people where they're at and remind them to give at like an appropriate timely basis. So one great like sort of idea or stat that I see some people doing is they track the average time between someone's first donation and their second donation so that they know, 40 days after anyone who's made a first time donation, that's a great time for us to call all those donors and see if they'll be willing to make a second donation, or send them an email and see if they'll be willing to make a second donation. And then I kind of started out by focusing on this, but making sure we understand the health of the program by tracking our big picture trends. What is our recurring donation churn rate? What is our retention rate year after year on our big time donors? How does like the first half of this year compare to the first half of the second year? And how can we use that data to, align our strategy for the next year, etc. So making sure that we're just keeping track of all of those things in a really holistic way so that we can make strategic decisions, and ensure that our program health is moving in the right direction.
Our next fundraising tactic is meeting people where they are. And when we're talking about that, we're really talking about mobile. I know working in tech personally, and then all of y'all in nonprofit advocacy and campaign organizations, we're always on our computers, right? But most people are really browsing and visiting websites, your websites, on their phone. And we need to be utilizing our resources to create a website and specifically donation pages that are optimized for mobile giving. So one of the biggest areas where organizations lose potential revenue is that very last step, which is the checkout. Even when donors are motivated, clunky forms or processes that aren't mobile friendly are causing a huge amount of donor drop off. And as we talked about earlier, every abandoned donation isn't just one gift lost in that moment. It's also that long-term relationship that could have grown from it. That's why it's so important to meet people where they are, especially on mobile. So text messaging, this stat is wild. Text messaging has a 99% open rate, and 90% of those text messages are read within 3 minutes. So alternatively, nonprofit and advocacy organizations are reporting email open rates in the 30 to 40% range. That contrast is striking. When a supporter receives a text, chances are extremely high they'll see it almost immediately. Whereas with email, messages will land in spam sometimes, they'll get buried, or they'll just go unopened. That timing and visibility difference is exactly why optimizing mobile-first donation funnels and text to give can dramatically reduce donor drop-off. Organizations that are using text to give are seeing incredible growth, in some cases 150% higher than other channels, because it puts the donation link directly in the supporter hand right when they're ready to act. So that means when you're using text to give, they're receiving that text message, they're 99% chance to open that text message within 3 minutes. And then once that text is opened, they'll click that link and they'll be led right to that fundraising page that was optimized for mobile giving. It's also critical to make sure your payment options are as seamless as possible. So features like Apple Pay and Google Pay let donors complete the gift in just a tap or two with no form to fill out and no friction. And behind the scenes, we have small but powerful tools like automatic card updater for recurring gifts or CAPTCHA that help reduce failed transactions and fraud while keeping the experience smooth for the donor. So when we talk about meeting donors where they are, what we really mean is reducing every possible barrier and making sure that when someone raises their hand to give, nothing is standing in their way. And then from a fundraising perspective, there's much less chance for a donor to drop off if all of the payment options you have available are available for that donor on one page. So every time you create a scenario where you're forcing that donor to click around to find the page in which they donate or pay the way that they prefer, you increase the chance that that donor is just going to close the browser and decide not to give at all. So if you have express payment options, Apple Pay, Google Pay, card, or any other payment method, you want to make sure you're including them all on that one donation page. That way the donor can decide the best way for them to give to your organization without having to navigate off that page and to find the page in which they can pay the way that they prefer.
Great, and we're going to make a fun little nation builder plug here with what Riley just shared. Wanted to highlight that direct debit for UK customers is coming soon. So if there are any folks in the UK who want to add this to their donation pages, as Riley mentioned, having all of those options in one place can reduce friction, reduce like the chance that a donor opens up your donation page and then gets distracted or moves somewhere else. It'll give them all of their options right in one place in order to choose like the best payment method for them.
Thanks, Rachel. All right, the last fundraising tactic we'll talk about here is growing recurring revenue. As we talked about earlier, one of the most critical challenges organizations face is retaining recurring donors. Recurring giving is the most reliable source of long-term revenue, but without the right tools in place, programs are never reaching their full potential. Too many organizations struggles here. Donors don't have the ability to easily manage their own gifts. Failed payments might quietly go unresolved. And as a result, those recurring programs are just never reaching their peak. But when you get recurring giving right, it becomes the backbone of your fundraising strategy. Monthly donors give more over time, they stay engaged longer, and they provide the kind of predictable revenue that lets you plan ahead with confidence. There are a few practical ways to make this happen. First, you want to make monthly giving your default ask. The average donor lifetime for recurring givers is nearly 8 years. So helping supporters choose that option upfront creates long-term stability. Second, you want to reduce page drop-off by offering all frequency options, one-time, monthly, or annual, on that same page. So while you want to make monthly giving your default ask, if you have a donor that only wants to donate one time, you don't want to make them click off your page to find a place where they can still donate to you. You want to make sure that they're able to donate that one time still on that same page. So in the same way that we talked about previously about offering all payment options on one page, so that way that donor doesn't have to search around to donate the way they prefer, you also want to do this for frequency options of donations. You're giving your donors choice without forcing them to navigate away to find a different page with their desired frequency option. Every extra click is the chance for the donor to reconsider to just close out of that browser window, and you want to keep it simple so that way it makes it much more likely that the donor will complete their gift. Third, if you do have to change your payment processor, you're moving to a different software, whatever might happen in your organization, it's critical you choose a software that supports recurring donation migration. You want to avoid the hassle of asking donors to restart their gifts manually. It saves the relationship with the donor, and it also preserves that revenue that you already have coming in. And finally, you want to invest in a system that supports self-service donor management. You want to let the donor log in and update their own information, giving them that independence over their own information. And then use backend tools like automatic card updater that quietly prevents lapses of recurring donors in the background. When recurring giving is set up this way, it's not just a revenue stream, it's a predictable and sustainable foundation that gives you the freedom to plan ahead with confidence. Cool. So, smarter fundraising isn't just about doing more, it's about doing what works best. So, by personalizing your asks, streamlining supporter journeys, using real time insights, optimizing for mobile, and building strong recurring programs, you can maximize every opportunity to grow sustainable revenue for your cause.
Really want to thank everyone for their time today. Really appreciate it. So want to hold some space just to shout out our 5-part series. Again, this was number 4 of 5, and next Wednesday we have another one that's focused on coordinating your ask across all channels. But hope everyone has a great rest of their day.